Yes.
Just like karaoke.
Yeah. Are you a karaoke gal?
I am.
Yes.
Sometimes. The mood strikes me.
Mm-hmm. Are you the one that like gets super emotionally into it?
I do.
All the
I do. Well, I like. I don't know if you ever heard of Saint Motel.
Yeah,
Group.
yeah.
I love them. So
Ditto.
there's one song that really gets the crowd moving, and that's all I do.
Is that do they have My Type?
That's
Is
it.
That,
That's exactly it. That's exactly
you don't
the
even
song.
know. I was saying that
song
on
gets me
repeat.
pumped up. Yes.
Literally yesterday.
and it's funny because people, even if they don't know the song, they hear it and they get like, "This song's awesome. I never heard the song before."
Mm-hmm. That was it. Do they have a good song, Never Dies?
Yeah, well, that's what I do. Van Horn, all of them are on my playlist. Yeah, but yeah, that's the one I do. So interesting.
Oh my God, yes.
And I'm getting too old for this.
Oh heck no. For karaoke? You said you're
that, yeah, having fun going out.
Never. Well, no, I guess that depends on what type of fun specifically.
Exactly.
Because there is the fun where
there
it's
is the fun that'll suck the life out of you.
you literally. We feel so drained the day
Oh
after,
my
like
God,
I
yeah.
can't.
Oh right, yeah.
Mhm.
Well, when you get to my age, you go out. Let's say you're home by midnight. Let's say you didn't even have a lot to drink.
Mm-hmm.
You wake up the next day like you partied till 4 a.m.
Oh
That
God.
just comes with age and kids, I guess.
I only got my first hangover like a year ago, because I used to think
Stop.
I was just immune to it, like I'm too tough for a hangover. But then I went one of those nights I didn't even drink a lot. It was just no water, no food.
Oh yeah.
Then you just
that'll
wake up.
do it.
I poisoned myself.
Yeah,
Why did
that'll
I
do
do
it.
this?
That'll do it.
It felt so good in the moment.
In the moment, right? You were living in the moment, and that's what it's about, right? So
Oh wait, I want to say something about. First off, so let's go. It's gonna
Let's
be the
go. Let's do
official,
it.
yes, start. But with meditation, I've been tapping into this type recently. I was listening to this yogi talk about in India. A yogi only masters typically one posture, and to master it, you'll have to be able to sit like 2 hours, 40 minutes within this posture, and it can just be sitting like this. And you feel no discomfort, no negative emotions. And if you can do that for that amount of time, you've essentially mastered that pose and you become a yogi. And which is
that's difficult to do.
yeah.
2 hours and 40 minutes. First of all, my thought is, who the hell's got that time?
Yeah, right. To practically practice that day in, day out. The mystics, right?
Exactly.
You live off. Well, I don't know if people live off of donations. I've seen different monkhoods where people essentially they just live off of donations, live very bare bones, aesthetic.
Yeah.
Spends a lot of time meditating. But you ever stare at something and you just start to go peripheral vision,
Yes.
just kind of zone out?
Yes.
Yes, that's been a kind of meditation I'm doing recently.
And that's okay.
Oh my God,
Oh
yeah.
my God, that's great. Because sometimes, I was telling my colleagues that if you go in the hallway between classes, find a tile on the floor and just focus on the tile. Don't even let your mind think about anything. Almost like you're daydreaming, but sometimes when you're daydreaming, your mind does begin to
and you can get stressed
go out.
Dreams,
and you bring yourself back. But if you can literally quiet and stop your brain from thinking, even I was doing that today, actually, when I was doing my meditation upstairs with the teachers. I was just focused on just above. I wasn't looking at anybody. And just honing in on this one thing and just allowing the words, allowing everything to come out. Yeah. Allowing the breath, everything just to come out and not, it's a good feeling. It is a good feeling.
It's weird to put it into very strict, logical explanations. The phrases I usually have heard is I take my hands off of the mind, or I take my hands off of my thoughts. And when I've done that, you start to achieve this state of bliss. That seems to be so much of meditation.
Well, it's funny because my husband was never really a big religious guy. He started getting into meditation, and he started to practice it more and more. And he explains that it's a euphoric feeling.
Yeah.
When you truly meditate and truly reach that peace and stop your brain, it is euphoric afterwards. And that drew him to meditate even more. So that's that's exactly what you want. You want to achieve that. And of course, it doesn't come right away.
No. And there's a funny theme that I'm sure I've heard many people experience where you think if you're thinking, you're failing at meditation. And that a lot of meditation is refocus, let the thought rise, let it fall, notice that you're attaching to it, and then release attachment. Like, you're going to have thoughts.
So when you begin meditating, you want to call to mind your surroundings. So you take a second and listen to what's going to be constant, right? So when we're in class, the sound of the vents, that's going to be a constant. Maybe outside, birds, that's going to be a constant. So you allow your brain, you allow your ears to not become desensitized to it, but kind of just falls to the back, right? And the other thing is this is actually a really good, I can't think of the word, coping mechanism. Coping mechanism, and I explain in my class, literally say, stop. Stop. Really? Because you want to cut that chemical connection off to stop your brain from thinking. And sometimes you have to continuously tell yourself stop. Even if sometimes you can say, if you're in a place to say it out loud, you say it out loud. Or you can let your mind wander and then say, I'm going to allow my brain to wander for 30 seconds, and then I'm going to turn it off. Turn it off. And literally tell yourself that. And you call to mind your intentions in the beginning of meditation. Call to mind your faults. Call to mind your stresses. Call to mind what it is that you do want to let go of. And you take a deep breath, and you let it go when you exhale. Let it go, right, when you exhale. I'm not taking it back in.
Oh, man, when you're saying that, you're making me wonder of, as I've been, over the last couple of years, dipping my toe deeper and deeper into the waters of prosperity, trying to find the blueprints for thriving, seeing what that consists of. And so for a while, naturally, I dove into psychology, and I started to notice more recently how much physiology and psychology are intertwined. Like, when we talk about the breath, like literally noticing, let's say you're mad. Take a second, have that meditative, I'm not attaching, but I'm noticing what happens to my physiology when I'm mad. Am I breathing like a...
So you're talking about self-awareness?
Yes.
Becoming more self-aware?
Yes, and noticing how much your psychological state is not due simply to the thoughts, the literal words you're repeating in your head, but also your points of focus, your breathing patterns, your body posture, what you're looking at, and as I'm beginning to realize how much your emotional state is not simply in the realm of thoughts, because weirdly, that's where I used to live in for so long.
Yeah. Did you ever hear the expression, get out of your own head?
Yeah.
It's actually hard to teach someone that. Like, I go through that with athletes where I don't know if you and if I mentioned this in our classes or whatever, but, if you talk to a good coach, 75% of the game is up here, is in the brain, is in the mind, right? And you can go into a game not realizing you've already claimed defeat. Like, if you're playing that team, so to get out of your own head. And I have a daughter who pitches in softball. And sometimes if she knows she's pitching against a really competitive batter, she'll get in her own head, and then the ball starts going all over the place. So what you have to do is think of when you get, and this is very difficult to do, when you come to that point where you have to emotionally figure something out, stop and recognize it. Then think to yourself, okay, where do I want to be? What is the thought that I do want? And you literally have to repeat that for 1 minute out loud. Because what happens is your brain has already created a road for those thoughts. So that negative thinking. And negative thinking is very easily manifested, right? So an analogy I like to use is a road. You have the road that you always travel to go to a certain destination. You have that same road that you take. It's almost like, when I'm on my way into work in the morning, it's like autopilot, right? It's like I don't even have to think about how to get to work. I just get there, right?
Mhm.
Well, that's what your brain does especially when you come into situations that you have to deal with. Your brain will go down that already wired road.
Mhm.
So you have to rewire. And one of the methods to do that is when you come into that situation, I got to change my wiring. I got to
Mm.
go down the road less traveled, right? So what you're doing is creating a new circuit, creating a new way. But you have to practice that as well, right? So you say it out loud for a minute, you repeat it after a minute, but then you have to remember that when you come into that situation, like I told my daughter, when you're at the mound and you got a battle, stop, repeat to yourself what you want, repeat to yourself what you need to do, and continue to do it, and then do it. Don't go down that road that you always take because you know that doesn't work.
Mantras. Oh,
And it's hard. When we get all crazy and spazzed out and emotional, it's hard to remember our mantras.
that makes me wonder. I'm thinking of a story from a psychologist. I think it was from psychologist Jordan Peterson. He's talking about one of his clients is deathly afraid of needles, has a phobia of needles, and the person's trying to figure out, how do I overcome this? And one of the methods was exposure therapy. So he'll bring a needle out into the session, and one of the important techniques that I took away was teaching the person that they have control over this needle. So at any moment, at any point, if they want to say, put the needle away, I will show you, I will prove to you that I'll actually put it away. And that one of the first tests they do is literally, I'm going to take it out and you're going to tell me immediately to put it away, just to prove to yourself that that is actually what will happen. And that's making me wonder, do you have any ideas about how you can build the faith you have in this method, in mantras?
I think that the method you're talking about is like a humanistic. It's allowing the person to know that they have control. They have control. And I always believe in taking it slow and steady. You know? Yeah, sometimes diving right into it works. But in a situation with extreme phobias, I think that slow, and like you said, you have to prove to yourself. You have to believe. You have to believe and you have to want. Right? So if you believe, whatever you believe, you're right. Right? You're right. Whatever you believe, you're right. Believe that you can control the behavior. Believe that you're in control of your behavior. And sometimes that requires repeating that, right? I know that when I see that needle, I can have that needle away anytime. I control it. It doesn't control me. But you have to believe that, right? And you have to know that that is it. And that takes time and understanding. And like you said, baby steps. I want you to tell me to put it away as soon as you see it, right? And then we'll take it the next step.
The baby steps. Because I'm imagining if someone wanted to practice the technique of mantras, but they threw it into a very high stress, high pressure, difficult situation right out of the bat. And if for whatever reason they fail, they may not have failed because of the mantra specifically, but they might teach themselves like, oh, see, it doesn't work. I knew it wouldn't work. I tried in this really difficult situation and it failed, so I'm not even going to try it again. So maybe there's some utility to, like you say, the baby steps. Try it out in an easy situation first, where there's not so much. You're not pitching against the best batter in the state. You're pitching against like your brother in the yard or something like that. You know what I mean?
A positive, right? Something that is going to give you positive feedback, right, to make you believe. But also, you have to believe. Like I said, your mantra and your words are just what they are, unless you make them work. You have to make them work. They're not going to work. You could say, I love you, I love you, I love you. But if you don't express it, if you don't really feel it, you could say, I love you all day. And it means nothing, right? So sometimes, mantras, you have to believe in that mantra. It has to be strong. And you have to believe in progress, not perfection, too. Be okay with failing. Be okay with falling. Fall forward. Don't go back to where you were.
As you're saying that, you're making me think of an artist talking about when it comes to creating something, there is a callus you have to form against failure, because within the nature of creation and experimentation, there will come a lot of failure because you don't know how to do it, right? That's why you're experimenting
Mhm.
and testing and creating. So you have to be very willing to, I don't know, let's say I'm creating a song and I'm trying this lyric here. No, that didn't work. And you have to be willing to do that maybe 10, 20, a dozen, 100 times before you find like, yes, that's the lyric. And to accept like, just because I didn't get it perfect on the first one doesn't mean I should just stop trying at all. I didn't
Right.
fail completely. That's just the natural part of the experimentation process.
Well, many of our great musicians, Michael Jackson, always thought that he was a failure, right? I mean, and to a perfectionist, you're never perfect, right? If you're a perfectionist, you're never perfect.
Always better, always better.
Always better, right? But you were continue what you were saying or repeat what you just said because something came to my mind. What did you
I was
just
saying
say?
something of
Or
to
like-
experiment, learn to callous yourself against failures
Yeah.
when you are testing out new ideas, and understand that maybe it's like a baby, right? To raise the baby, you're not going to throw it into the most difficult of situations. You're going to understand that Bambi, right? You're not going to learn how to walk immediately. You're going to fall a whole bunch as you're learning this new process,
Right.
and that's a natural part of the experimenting and testing process.
Well, one thing that's important about what you're saying is, yes, be willing to fail, but if you're not so willing to fail at first, recognize that you learn so much when you do fail.
Yeah.
I think about relationships. If a relationship fails, whatever type of relationship it is, if you're failing, yes, once you get past the surface emotions and what you go through with, let's say, a breakup, when you reflect back on, and that obviously because that relationship you broke up, it failed, right? When you use the word failed, you learn so much about yourself when you fail, right? And that's not what I want.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I'm not going to accept that, speaking in terms of relationship. And hey, sometimes when you fail, the only place to go is up, right? If you fall, you got to get up. Maybe it might be on your own time, might be slow, right? But you'll do it. You got to do it to survive.
That's a strange part about life because you want to get what you genuinely want, right? And I don't know, let's say in the pitching example, I want to pitch and make every batter strike out. Like that's what I want. But to recognize that every time you don't do that, it's difficult to me to realize how much I should balance enjoying and embracing failing because of how much it can teach me with also hating it. Hating the failing can also be a powerful driver. That negative emotion can also at times be something that actually makes me better.
Incentive to get better, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you do have some people like my daughter who internalize that failure, and they really own it and hold on to it. And what I found is when you do hold on to it, it almost makes you spiral out of control, and it's hard to get a hold of yourself, so to speak. But if you're willing to say, "Oh man, you know what? That sucked. That was really bad. Well, I shouldn't do that again." That's a growing point. That's a growing point. So yeah.
The spiraling out of control.
Yeah, you kind of just, like I said, it's easier to manifest, and we tend to manifest more negative things than we do positive. It takes a little bit more work for the brain to continue to be positive. I mean, think about it yourself. How many people do you know that are just so positive and all they are is positive and they see I mean, hey, I think it's fantastic that they're positive all the time, and I think it's fantastic that they see good and beauty and success and everything and grace. But how many people do you really know that are like that? Right?
And all the time, right?
And all the time, or a good percentage of the time anyway.
Yeah.
Not a lot. Not a lot. Because for some reason, our brains tend to go down that negative track a lot easier.
Yeah, here we have a negativity bias.
Yeah.
And I've heard it explained through evolutionary theory. Like,
Mm.
you imagine the person out in the jungle, and there you hear a tiger, and the one person thinks, oh, that tiger's probably not not going to come after us. They're probably far away. The more optimistic, like, tra-la-la, everything is golden route. And that person's more likely to get eaten than the person who says, like, oh, crap, I hear a tiger, like, run, like, get as far away, feel negative, feel fear, feel
Right.
that.
Well, yeah, that's almost like fight or flight, like that adrenaline, like in what you do with it. And that's sometimes to me, like you said, to go with that whole concept of either do or die or the strongest will survive. That idea, and that's what failing sometimes teaches us. Stress. We're all going to experience stress, but what's the difference between the person who goes into a deep depression after being stressed to a person who ends up being successful? So it's how you what you do with it, what you do with that energy, and how you decide to use that energy. Are you going to run away and hide? Are you going to be fearful and protect yourself? And sometimes running away and hiding isn't necessarily a bad thing because you're protecting yourself,
Yeah.
right?
Very true. There are times where you need to take cover.
Yeah, well, facts. But yeah, I mean, learning what to do in certain situations, and not or facing the fear, working through that spike of chemical imbalance you get when you do see a needle, like back to that analogy with phobias, and how you work through it.
You make me think there's this psychologist, Gabor Mate, who is wonderful in the realm of addiction. He's studied a long time, yada, yada. And he's talking about child rearing. And when you're raising a kid and a child's throwing a tantrum, and there are some that fun little part of human nature, and that there are a common psychological teaching where when the child's throwing a tantrum, you kind of tell them to like go sit in a corner until you're ready to come back into the group. And when you're like normal again, we'll call it, that's when you're allowed to come back into the group. But he was saying, well, in his thoughts, that is not actually an optimal way to raise a child. Rather, when they have that tantrum, as the adult, kind of calmly acknowledge, like, oh, wow, you're really angry right now, aren't you? And the kid's like, yeah, I am. And it's not exactly, well, we'll see how I word this. It's difficult for me to explain. He describes almost you learn to sit with the emotion rather than to try and suppress it and crush it. You learn how to sit with it, and when you can sit with it, like, oh, okay, this is what it feels like to be angry. These are the thoughts that come along with it, the desires, all those sorts of things. Now, what do I do with this anger? Well, I'm looking at my dad, who might be a role model, and he's calm in response to it. He's like, okay, I understand you're feeling this anger. You still can't do that thing that you wanted to do. You can't eat all those cookies that you wanted to, but, I'm not going to hate you or kick you out of the group because you're feeling that. And where was I going with that?
I don't know, but I read a book and I forgot the name of the author, but I'm thinking of it. It's How to Speak to Children, and that touches exactly on that philosophy. That so a lot of times kids freak out, younger kids freak out because they don't know any other way to express what they're feeling. Right? So they don't have the words that we have. Or sometimes, maybe at school, maybe at a friend's house, maybe with friends, when they did feel a certain way, somebody made them feel that it was not okay to feel that way. So the adult in that situation that you were talking about is letting the child know that you're aware that that child is not happy right now, and that is okay. It is okay. I can see you acknowledge the feeling. You acknowledge what the child is going through. Don't ask questions. Why do you feel that way? Why are you unhappy? Don't ask the questions. You just you're validating. No, it's okay. You're validating their feelings. And that's what is important with kids, validation and letting them know that what they're feeling is okay. And yes, you're going to be angry. Yes, there's going to be times when you're upset and angry, and there's going to be times that you can't get what you want. Is that the best way to handle it? No, but I understand you don't always have the right words for them.
Oh, there's two things that pop in my head. One is when you say kids acting out, typically what people think of is they're doing a negative behavior. You're acting out. But this is also from Gabor Mate. I was listening to a podcast with him yesterday, so I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of his thoughts pop into my head. But he's describing, well, what also does that mean? When you're playing charades, for example, what do? You have to act out what you are trying to express. And when a kid, like you said, doesn't have the words for it, they are acting it out. Whether it's rage, sadness, this, that, and the other. And there's also the thought of the example of your daughter when she has the deep pain in whatever form that specifically takes in her that can sometimes spiral out of control. And that makes me wonder, like, how much utility is there in sorry, Miss Doppler's daughter. I don't want to too deeply psychoanalyze you. Yeah.
Sorry. She's a good guinea pig. Well, she don't know won't hurt her, right?
To think the utility in being able to sit with that pain and not let it become something detrimental, but rather use it as a useful emotion. Like, even though it hurts, it can still be very useful. I used to feel if I felt ashamed about whatever activity, maybe I'd want to run away from it, suppress it, feel pleasure, stop thinking about it, rationalize why, oh, that person that made me feel ashamed, they're actually ridiculous. They don't know what's right. But more recently, I've noticed, like, oh, wait, that can be really useful. That's showing me how I'm screwing up at times. Sometimes it can be irrational. But when there's a rational shame, I'm like, oh, I need to get my shit together.
Right. Right. And again, that's self-awareness, right? And I mean, think about a failed relationship. You know, a lot of times we hear, well, they did this and they were like that. Well, again, self-reflect, right?
Yeah.
Self-reflect. Reflect. What didn't I like, or what did I like, or what did I do that I could have done better?
Yeah.
You know, and speaking to that, you should never be confined, right? When you're emotional, don't confine yourself. In solitary confinement is like a very detrimental to the psyche. And I say that I was very tired, I was hungry, and I was on my way home from my trip this weekend. So I had 3 hours to do nothing but think, right? Well, by the time I got home, I had worked myself up about something that didn't even happen, wasn't even going to happen, right? Because I had 3 hours to sit and contemplate and think and blah, blah, blah. So when my husband came home, he did not have a chance. He did not stand a bloody chance. He could have said hi, would have ripped his face off for no good. But because, like you were saying, like, you allow those feelings to manifest and there's nothing else around to stop you from thinking about that, and you just continue and it just keeps going, and you spiral out of control. But when you're not in the right mindset, and when you're not, so I don't know if you remember from class, but 3 days without sleep, you can be considered clinically insane, right? So if you're lacking sleep and you're lacking proper nutrition, right, and then you put yourself in solitary confinement for 3 hours, that just spells doom, right? So my point is, and I when I did get home, I'm like, I can either make this really ugly or I could just say, I love you, I'm going upstairs.
Yeah, right. And he's like, all right, I get it.
Leave me alone, right? And for me, that was a big deal, because maybe a few years ago, I would have come home and started some
drama.
Shit.
Yeah.
Like, you would have handed me divorce papers the next day or whatever. Like, you do. And to be able to, for me, that was a big thing. Like, I stopped myself and I'm like, if you don't stop in this moment, I was recognizing what I was feeling. I was recognizing what was happening. And that was a really good thing for me, because it could have, like I said, but I said, nope, I'm not. I'm just going to go upstairs. And he said to me, he's like, you didn't even come downstairs and talk to me. And I said to him, I said, because I knew in the frame of mind that I was in, coupled with the fact that I hadn't eaten good all, hey, look, I am a true believer in you got to fuel your body good, or else, well, I'll get on that analogy in a second, but I hadn't eaten well all weekend. I hadn't gotten a lot of sleep, right? I was feeling tension in my neck. I'd drive by myself for 3 hours, right? And I tried to have relaxation music on, what have you. But it does allow you to think. You're thinking. And they say, idle time is the devil's time. Like, the more you think, the more you're going to self-sabotage yourself. So I had said to him, I was like, look, I knew that if I started, it wasn't going to go down a road that I wanted. So I just said, no, I'm going to go upstairs. And I'm sorry if it seemed like I blew you off, but I needed to just, because I would have said something I didn't want to say, and I didn't want that to happen. And I think that self-recognition and that, again, recognizing that, and that's a really good growing point and something that you should really pride yourself on when you do come into situations like that, and you are able to say, whoa, I know this is not going to end well. If I do this will happen. But if I do that might happen. So growing. I think for kids and raising kids, allowing them allowing them to fail is growing, helps them grow. I mean, of course, not where they would get hurt or hurt somebody else, but allowing them to fail helps them grow, and recognizing consequences, right? And if you think about the laws of physics, for every action, there's an equal reaction, right? So everything you do is going to have something push back, right? And kids need to sometimes recognize that. And sometimes it's okay to let them recognize that on their own. You're not always going to be able to get that. I see you're angry. Again, recognizing and validating their feelings, because they don't know how to, right?
To validate. What does it mean exactly to validate a feeling?
So when you validate the child's feelings or somebody's feelings, you're letting them know that you understand and what they're feeling is not wrong. Okay? For example, I'll give you an easy example. I come home every day and I say, oh my head is pounding. I have such a bad headache. My husband could say one of two things. He could say, oh, stop, suck it up. Oh, you're fine. That is a non-validation. He is not accepting or thinking that what I'm feeling is correct. But if he said, oh my goodness, do you need something to eat? I'm sorry that you feel that way. Do you need to go lay down? Can I do anything for you? That's validating. He is recognizing that I'm wrong, as opposed to telling me I'm not, or what I'm feeling isn't right, right? So that's validation. You're validating. You're making it valid. It's correct. What you're feeling, I understand. And I think kids need that. Kids need validation. And again, they're not going to come up to you and say, Mom, I need to know that what I'm feeling is not right. Right? So they're gonna portray that in other ways. So.
Oh, what were you doing in the mountains?
Right. So, I'm really old. So since I was 15, my mom has had a cabin up in North Jersey, and I spent a lot of time up there. But I guess with the past 5 years, I come from a pretty big family. So I have five aunts. And then there's 13 cousins, grandchildren. So just the girls get together and we go away for the weekend. Usually in the fall, because I love it up there in the fall. It's beautiful. And we have our compression session.
What is that? That sounds cool.
It's funny. Like Friday night, everybody just let loose. Just like decompress, man. If you have to have a cocktail, have a cocktail. Do you whatever it is, right? And then the next day is. I know it sounds silly, but we have breakfast and our coffee. We have coffee talk.
cool. No, it's some of the best.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Coffee talk, and then we play games. Like we played Minute to Win It. Like we went on teams and stuff like that. Like we really get into it. And
I saw a competitive flair in your eye. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. There's that. There's that. I'm competitive, but my husband is even more competitive.
Fun.
But so are my cousins and my aunt. My mom is very competitive too. But we played some games, and then we just sat around and just talked about sometimes even though there was like 13 of us, maybe 2 or 3 of the cousins would get together and talk about something that was really intimate between them, like something that meant a lot to them or didn't mean a lot, or what they've been going through. And it's really good to, again, and it's validation. Expressing, validating, and commiserating. Commiserating is okay.
What's commiserating?
Commiserating is when you get together with somebody negative and they kind of have like the same type of negative, and you guys like just fester a little bit in that negativity, like just eat it up, like yes, I can't believe they did that, like what an asshole. Blah, blah, blah. You commiserate together, and it's just that's okay because that's validating too. It's to know that you're not the only one who felt that way, right? But then you move on again. Again, it's okay to recognize it and move on.
Yeah, and sometimes that trash talking is fun and maybe healthy, like that venting.
And that's it. It's maybe sometimes it can be gossip, and you don't want to be hurtful, but sometimes it is just that venting, a bitch session.
Yeah,
straight up. And then you leave, and you're okay. You got it off. You let go. You recognized it, and you let it go. Now we also did one really cool thing, and it was because now my one cousin is really into the celestial things. She was talking about the new moons and the new moons that were out recently, whatever. But we each got a piece of paper, and this is a really good therapeutic technique as well. We each got a piece of paper, and we put on there an intention that we had for ourselves. We had on there a positive and a negative, something that we wanted to manifest and something that we kind of wanted to let go of, right? And we wrote it down, and some people will have a mantra like, if I will it, it will be, or it will be if I will it, or let it, you will it on, you put it out there to the universe, whatever you want to say, the higher beings, the higher powers that be. So we each did that, and we thought about it again. We gave ourselves a minute or two to really meditate on those things, that positive and that negative thing. And then when we were ready, we folded it up and put it in the fire.
Beautiful.
Nice, right? And it was a nice thing. It really was. And I did something like that too when I broke up with somebody. Broke my heart. They broke my heart. And I know at the time we didn't know, but I know it's not good for the environment. But what I did was the balloon signified me letting go, and I let go when I was ready. I had to let go of the balloon.
Oh man, that's no. Continue. I felt like you were gonna. Like,
no, I'm good. No, that's it. So no. Well, we did that and went to sleep. The next day, some of us left. Now, after all that excitement and all that action, and there's only like 2 or 3 of you, you could really just like take a deep breath and relax a little bit. And then we debriefed. How did it go? Was this person on good behavior? Did that was that aunt a jerk? Or I wasn't sure how this one was going to be. Because when you get 13 women, and then one night minus sleep. Like,
it goes down a bit.
I was going to say, that could be a recipe for disaster. But no, and like I said, there's just a few of us who sat around and debriefed. And then I went home.
That sounds beautiful. So it was a pure gals night or gals trip?
It was. And like I said, we do that every year, which is really nice. And I think we need it. You know what I mean? It's so hard sometimes, especially for my younger cousins. They have younger kids to get away, and leave their kids. It's hard, but we did it. You make it happen.
Yeah. Heck yeah.
It's rewarding. It's rewarding.
Oh my God. Especially just being out in nature like that.
I mean, how many times do you really get to look up at the sky and appreciate it? You know what I mean?
Without the light pollution and just the stars. Oh my
In the
God.
mountains, I know. And we walked and just took in, and the leaves are starting to change. It's it's therapeutic.
Yeah.
Even though I'm a shore person, not a mountain person, you still just learn
Could
to
appreciate the
take it in.
magic.
But that's something you have to learn too. You have to learn to stop and smell the roses. You have to learn to stop and appreciate the things that are around you. I think that's,
Heck yeah.
and sometimes we forget and take that stuff for granted.
You're making me think of how much of joy nowadays. I'll be that guy for a second. Nowadays is taken from.
Good thing your English teachers aren't around to hear that.
Oh my God, that sounds
That
fun.
word nowadays. They hate that word. But
What-
I don't know what other word to use, but they hate that word.
Is that like a technically incorrect word? Or
I think like some students use it like when they're writing papers, and the teachers are like, "You don't write that word nowadays." But anyway, go ahead.
okay.
But this time in life,
Okay.
I don't know what another word would be, but
In modern times.
you can use that word.
Thank you. That's so often people I've noticed are trying to get joy from external means, and maybe from really big extreme things like this super stimulating. You're on your phone and you have the most intense music playing that you can switch to a new song in a split second. These 6-second videos that's super like comedic, like boom, burst of whatever chemical feels good, another burst, and you can always scroll and be fast forwarding, rewind, find this like super
It's too
intense
much.
high. Yeah.
And you're always constantly searching,
Yeah.
because I don't think that happiness is an external. Fulfillment is not external. It is temporary. You get a temporary fix. What happens is when you do see those, like we talk about this in class too, when you do see those reels, or you do hear that music that gets you pumped up, or when you eat that first Oreo cookie, you get a shot of dopamine, right? and then what happens is you feel good, so you continue to do that behavior to try to continue to feel good.
Mm-hmm.
But there's other ways to do that too, because unfortunately with the reels and the TikToks, children who are, my daughter being one of them, and adolescents and young adults, their brain can't keep focused in class for more than 13 seconds. Because those reels are like 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 20
Of
seconds,
super
right?
jam-packed content, yeah.
And then they can quick switch, right? Or if you don't like something, you swipe left, right? But then when they come into class,
Why can't I swipe left on my teacher?
Exactly. That's exactly it. We're in a situation now as educators where we're trying to fight that and teach them to be able to focus a little longer. You know what I mean? Instead of, because my daughter came home from school, that same daughter. And she said, she got into the reels really big. You know what I'm talking about, right? I'm sure your
Unlike
listeners
TikTok
know.
and
Yeah. Again, where you switch through it, it's constant change or something new, right? And school started. She's in 8th grade, and she said, "Mom, I like lose focus really easy." And I'm like, "Yeah, we need to cut back your screen time." And I wasn't trying to be, that mean mom, but it is statistically shown their brain gets used to that constant change. So when they don't have that constant change, they lose focus. Now, psychologically, we only hold attention for 20 minutes normally. But then that was before all the social media stuff. And then now we've shortened that time to hold attention.
During this large-scale psychological experiment
Right?
that's being done on
right?
men.
I think COVID taught us a lot. I do. I think COVID did teach us a lot. Or we should learn. We should recognize what COVID has and hasn't done to the psyche.
Elaborate on
And for
what?
communication. Well, prior to COVID, I know that there was a lot of talk about virtual schools, right? Maybe the need for not having teachers. Maybe you could just have a robot, right? But what COVID has taught us, when students went virtual, grades went down. And I have it in black and white. I could show you, and I showed my husband too. I'm like, if anybody ever says to you virtual schooling is okay. Now, I was not an advocate of homeschooling. I said, your child needs human interaction and socialization, and you don't get that with homeschooling, right? But then when COVID hit, we were forced to homeschool, right? And students stopped talking. They stopped communicating, right? And they didn't need to think, because if you gave them a test or something, everything was right there at their fingertips. While the teacher was talking, you could split screen and Google the answer or whatever.
What tactics did they try to do to
eliminate that?
Yeah, because I can't imagine they were very successful.
No, it wasn't very good. It wasn't good. Actually, we do have a program where just for students that are in our class at that particular time, we could see what they're looking at on their computers at home. If they're on their Chromebooks for school, and we can actually close out their tabs if they're not where they're supposed to be. But
then they just put their phone like
right. Oh no. Well, and it's true too, because I see the students that you could see them looking at two different screens, like you're gaming over here, and they just got me on over here, and I'm like, come on, man. Or you don't see them at all. But
my camera's broken.
Yeah, well, that. But the big thing was they hide. During virtual learning during COVID, all you would see were like ceiling fans, foreheads, curtains. But then, of course, we said, if you want to be counted present, and some schools didn't push this, but we did here, luckily. If you want to be marked present and not absent, I need to see your face. I need to see your face.
Yeah, fair enough.
You know what I mean? And kids did not talk. They didn't talk. They didn't talk to me. They didn't answer questions. You know how they talked? If they had something to say, they would chat it.
In the group chat?
They would put it in the chat. And I'm like, use your words. Use your word. Like, you can talk, give a voice, right? And kids became very used to that. Again, they weren't held to a higher standard because they couldn't be, because they were virtual and they weren't coming back in. They didn't have to see the teacher face to face. There's something to be said about that accountability piece, right? I got to go and I got to do this. They're going to say something in class. They're going to see me, see my face, and I'm not going to have my homework, and it's devastating, right? Now, some kids came back to school, some kids didn't, but we really did lose an integral part of learning when we went virtual. And like I said before, the takeaway from that, if we've learned anything, it is that humans need humans. We need human interaction. Humans need each other. They need people. People need people. We are social creatures. We might be introverted, we might be extroverted, but we still are social creatures. And I say to them, I'm like, what, can you think of a job, a career where you don't have to interact with anyone? Even if it's via computer, you still have to interact with someone, right? You still at some point have to interact, right?
For at least like 5 minutes, yeah.
However long, you still have to interact, right? And then think about those people who committed crimes or serial killers. They're really, well, I guess that could be either way. I don't want to say that. I was going to say, sometimes you see these people, they really are quiet on the inside. Outside they might, if they're out in a public setting, they might be okay. That might be a disorder. But and then, or they're like super quiet. They don't talk to anybody or whatever. But I mean, it's very difficult to be a person and not ever talk to anybody.
Yeah.
Oh my
God. Yeah.
Imagine?
I'll go on my introverted stints, we'll call them, where it's like I've spent 2 days essentially just inside doing this, that, and the other, and then I'll get this craving, like I need to not even talk, just to be around the person.
Be somebody. Yes.
But it's weird because I'll notice after those prolonged periods, it can be just walking by a person in the gym and I'll feel this anxiety level raise, like literally just being in close proximity, walking by, like, it's hard to put my finger on exactly.
Well, what's weird about what you're saying too is there are times that I don't want to talk to anybody. You're like, I don't want to interact or engage with them in that way, whether it be like family or a colleague, whomever, right? And that's okay, but then again, it gets bottled up, and you have to eventually engage with someone, you know. So
Yeah, and it will
we
literally.
are humans need humans, and I wanted, that was the biggest thing that I've recognized from a psychological standpoint, that we need to learn from COVID. We went through something that would be unethical to literally experiment with, right? You can't experiment. You can't experiment on humans, right? It's unethical. So we had to go through this uncharted territory in our lifetime. So then let's learn from that. Let's learn from that. Now, when students we all went back to school last year regular. But the COVID numbers spiked around Christmas time, right? They were going to spike. So school closed for 2 weeks after the holidays. I had students literally say, Doppler, I'm not going to do anything. I can't work that way. I don't work that way. And I showed my husband, because I is still old school. I keep my grades on my paper in black and white, and then I'll enter them into the computer. And I said, hon, look, 100, 100, 100, 100. Then we went virtual. It was 100, 0, 0, 0. So those kids that were all 100s, Zero. Not even attempt. And like I said, some of them just came right out and say, I can't learn that way. I'm not going to be able to do anything. And you see it right there in black and white, like what a disservice virtual learning was. And we really need to, education, child development really should take advantage of that time period and what was really happening, and why did depression go up in our kids? Lack of communication, lack of human interaction, right? Why did our kids not rebound? Kids are resilient. Kids are known to be resilient and to rebound quickly from things. They can get over things easier, right? But not this time, not as fast this time. So we really need to, like I said, as educators, as psychologists, as doctors, as scientists, whatever, look at that time period and really get everything we can from that, because you can't do that under normal circumstances. You can't experiment with people.
Yeah, unless you go like Nazi route. But I think we'd all agree, let's not do that.
Probably not a good idea.
Probably not, right?
I wouldn't even say spread another pandemic. I wouldn't even say that. It was a terrible time for a lot of people, you know? And I feel like some people either really embraced it and took that time to do well for themselves, or some people just fell. They just fell. And
I can only imagine like a really extroverted student, because I really get charged up by people.
Same, right? Yeah. I for me, like my husband's the introvert. He's the quiet, shy, reserved one, and I'm the talker and blah blah blah. But I like people were getting their groceries, Instacart and stuff. I was like, I'm going to the store. I gotta get out of this house. I gotta see somebody. I gotta talk to somebody.
Talk to the cashier for like 20 minutes on the way out. Yeah.
I don't care if it's through a mask. I need interaction with people.
Literally.
Yeah. And I think that hurt a lot of people, especially people who didn't have the means to get out. They weren't able to get out and socialize. You know? So that's,
and there are people who live with like older family.
Or even kids.
I don't have a car. What do I?
Yeah. Or so and so's mom said we can't go over there, or so and so's mom doesn't want them to come out, or the kids whose parents are working and they're stuck at home.
Oh.
4 walls.
4 walls too.
Right. Make it 4 walls in time. Solitary confinement. You might. I mean, could we say that was a form of solitary confinement?
Yeah, very seriously. At least they had a screen.
Think about it.
At least they had a screen, which is a strange thing to say
True.
for all the negatives that come with it.
Yeah.
At least you could like text your friends, see them in some sort of video chat, be in a video game, interact that way.
Well, what's interesting about that too is that sometimes that screen or that video game is under normal circumstances is the only way that student will interact. Like I don't want to say hide behind the screen, but feel more comfortable. Like I won't get videotaped, but I'll talk all day long on the microphone. But like other people, like you're comfortable interacting back and forth which I think is a big thing behind that whole furry concept. You hide behind the mask. I do. I think that that's really interesting. But yeah, so it's the thing.
Yeah, that has been interesting. That seems to have been getting more popular over the
With the
past few years.
furries?
Yeah. Do you ever
I
now and then
haven't
see a
seen
student
any. No, I haven't seen any here in our school.
uh-huh.
But I have heard in my kids' school that kids come in with masks on, tails. They can't do full furry masks because of school policy. But and then I heard like furry conventions.
Oh yeah.
And again, it's like easier to talk to somebody without seeing them, and I guess it's a whole judgmental, or maybe they have rejection issues, social anxiety, and talking through behind something helps.
This is a bit of a side tangent, not exactly to do with social anxiety, but somewhat connected. I've heard that if someone has a lot of repression from play as a kid, like simply they don't get to play as much as they would like to as a kid, that as they get older, they'll try to relive it by embodying all these different. Okay, I'm getting way too spastic. Let's hone this in for a second. Imagine when a kid's playing dress up when they're young. They're playing these different roles. I'm Batman. I'm playing mom. I'm playing dad. I'm playing this, that. I'm playing the dog in the house, etc. And if that gets repressed, for example, you have to go to school at a certain age, and you can't do that when you're in school. You have to sit in that chair and be very attentive for several hours a day. It's kind of squeezed down. When they get older, perhaps for the furry thing, which is almost hilarious to say, but true, that's their way of playing role playing, right?
Is it cosplay?
Cosplay would be, I think more stereotypically, like you see the anime character I have set up here, where you play as a character from a show or something along those lines.
Oh, okay.
And I've also heard this is very testy waters, but if you don't want to go into it, fair enough. But I've heard psychologists say that sometimes, obviously not all the time, but when a person is experimenting with being trans or with playing different gender roles, that could be their repressed childhood play nature kind of expressing itself as they get older.
No, I think that, of course, I don't want to say all, right? We don't want to use the word all
Definitely.
trans or all people who become maybe interested in the same sex. There are situations where, and it has been said that you're a boy, you have to play with this, and you're a girl, you have to play with that, and that's what you guys have to play with. And if you suppress that, then it'll come out, and you'll become. And if you're not allowed to do that, right, you'll be this way when you're older. And yes, that does happen. If you suppress certain things, there's a bunch of different things that can happen, right? So there's different approaches to different theories, like the psychoanalytic theory suggests that when you continuously suppress childhood trauma, that it will manifest in some type of psychological disorder when you grow up. There's other approaches, there's other things, but yeah, I mean, it could manifest itself into something, hating a certain group.
Yeah.
But, and it is society. It is society that makes people feel certain kinds of ways too, I believe. What society says is right and wrong. It all starts in the home. I think that that's important. Like you said, a parent suppresses, or a guardian suppresses, or even somebody close to that person suppresses some type of something, just starts in the home and how the parent allows it or doesn't allow it.
And then it just makes me wonder what is influencing the parent, all the different societal influences they're growing up, their own parents, their own friends. Yeah.
Their generation. And how things were when they were. It's interesting because my husband is on the conservative side, and my daughter's school loosened their policy on dress code, and my husband was like, "What? What? She can't go to school. Who goes to school dressed like that?" I'm like, and the superintendent literally said, society dictates that. We have to kind of reflect what society says is okay and not okay. So you have to be aware of what's happening in society. Society does dictate a lot of our behavior. And that's another philosophy. You know, how much of our behavior is because of society? How much of it is really what we do or don't want to do, and the conflict that we get from that because of what society tells us that's right or wrong.
And then how to figure out when is it time to be a rebel? When is it time to to rage against the machine, so to speak? Yeah.
There are times.
Yes, most certainly.
There are times. And you know what? I think that if you get that passionate and you feel the necessity to rebel, whatever that may be, as long as you're not hurting yourself or anybody else, I think it's a growing point. Could be, you know, whether it's going out and what do you call it? Protesting, you know, or speaking up or speaking out, and that could be a form of rebellion, right? Working out could be a form of rebellion. Eating, not eating could be a form of rebellion. So as long as it's not, I think rebellion sometimes could be, it is healthy sometimes to rebel, right? It's a part of human nature. It's a part of who we are, right? As long as, like I said, as long as it's not like you're hurting yourself or somebody else.
Oh, that gets weird. Do you think there are any exceptions in which hurting yourself or others be? And if you don't want to answer that, that's fair enough.
I don't know. Is there ever, is there ever good justification enough to hurt yourself or someone else?
I'm thinking of the very, very dramatic example of the Vietnamese monk setting himself on fire to protest the war.
Well, let me tell you, I think that, not even that, like kamikaze pilots in World War II, or when you have these extreme groups like the Taliban dying, suicide bombers, right? But they are extreme.
Yeah.
Right? And Aristotle said, avoid the extremes. The ends must satisfy the means, right? So whenever you get real far left or real far right, you are dipping into a danger zone. Okay?
Yeah.
Somebody's going to get hurt.
Yeah. And that just makes me continue.
That's it. But you want to stay somewhere like in the middle.
The moderate.
You want to be. You can be a little on this side or a little on that side, but when you start getting into extremes, whether it's extreme nationalism, extreme religion, right? Extremes can be dangerous.
Hell yeah. Although that makes me think of a system like, to, I guess, play the devil's advocate for a second. If you grew up in like a North Korea, perhaps being very extreme is one of the best and maybe one of the only ways to effectively change your environment, your society. Like,
well, who's changing it?
I'm thinking if someone tried to change it internally, maybe try to be
Well, would that happen in a place like North Korea, though? Remember,
I imagine
right?
It gets shut
Under
down
a
very
dictator,
quickly,
right?
yeah.
It's not gonna, right? Because it probably would have by now. You have to think of Americans are very unique, right? Because of the way we have been raised and the thought processes that we have been raised on. And we think the way we think because of the way we were raised and with our freedoms and know what's owed to me or what my rights are and this and that, right? So for us to try to fit inside the brain of a communist or somebody who lives in a communist country is very difficult to do, right? Because, hey, look, you drive on the right side of the road, right? Because that's normal. Yeah? Stop at a stop sign. Why? Because that's normal. That's what we do. Well, that's normal to them, right?
Yeah.
So that's how it is. This is always how it's been. This is how it is. And some people find an odd comfort in that.
Yeah.
They become complacent in what's comfortable, and that's comfortable. But also you do have, I mean, hey, look, in a communist North Korea, who has the money? The government, that's it, right? And nobody else, and you're going to get shut down.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to lose that power or that money. So it's going to get shut down. So it's very hard to, and they have a lot of propaganda. Did you ever watch North Korean American propaganda? And when you think about it from a psychological standpoint, what is propaganda? It's brainwashing.
A lot of mantras.
It's hypnosis, right? It's brainwashing, which is a form of hypnosis, people could say, or vice versa. I mean, yes, we're exposed to it all day, but they're exposed to it to a different degree. right?
literally unimaginable. If you're ever fascinated in someone who's lived in and escaped North Korea, there's a wonderful woman called Yeonmi Park,
Mm.
Yeonmi, and then Park just spelled like normal Park.
Mm.
And she's talked about it being a different world. It's not like it's a different country
Mm.
because she's come to America like, no, this is a different planet. It's like a different
Yeah.
dimension when you go over
Yeah.
there. And strangely, when you talk about the comfort of those areas, I'm struck with the thought that she misses it at times. Not all the fear and oppression, but she says there's a love that she can't remove for her homeland, for her home.
Yeah.
And there's this longing to go back. And she says her mom said the same thing, her sister, even though she's described it as hell in so many unimaginable ways. And the fact that it could be normal to be starving constantly, like, yeah, that's just normal. Seeing dead people all the time, that's just normal.
Yeah.
Oh, here's a crazy concept. I feel like as a psychologist, you really get a kick out of this, which is probably not the right way to say it, but whatever. That she described the concept of love only existed in relationship to their leader. When she was growing up, you didn't love your parents. You didn't have a romantic relationship with another person. That whole concept was completely non-existent. It only existed for Kim Jong.
Well, that is fascism.
Mm.
That's the concept of fascism, where you put the love of the state over the love of anything else. It's the state first, or the country, or your leader first, then everything else.
Yeah.
And again, like you look back in history and you're like, well, how did all those leaders become leaders? Because people found a comfort. People found
I have the answers.
Yeah. They saw hope, or they saw promise, or they felt protection, right? From and also they don't know otherwise, right? So I could see that. I really could. And my mom's home wasn't the nicest, right? I grew up a little in poverty, I'd say, single family on the outskirts of Trenton. But there was always something drawing me back to home. There was always, I hated it sometimes. We didn't have the nicest cabinets. We didn't have the newest kitchen. We didn't have, nice new carpets. It had an old smell to it, whatever. But it was still something about the comfort of being home. And home isn't necessarily, home is subjective. Just leave that. Home is subjective.
Being where the heart is.
It's subjective. It's up to the person to decide what that home is. But I could see that. See, like I said, I've lived in a beautiful home when I was in college, and I still wanted to go home to my mom's house. Yeah, it's warm and cozy. My kids say, "Oh, Grandma's house was so cozy." She doesn't live there anymore, but Grandma's house was so cozy. But I think she made it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, what a feel! It's so. I heard that you can't trust a person until you know their home, until you walked in and seen that. And I don't know if that's exactly true, but there's something to that feels right.
Well, you got to look at the upbringing of the person. There's certain things of how people are brought up that you can't really change or modify because it's just instilled in them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When my husband came from a different family than I did. I came from a divorced family, a blended family. My husband's parents were together.
What's a blended family?
So a blended family is when mom and dad are divorced, and then mom meets somebody else.
Gotcha.
And gets married, and they all move in together, or dad meets somebody else and they get married and move in together, and they have kids, and the other parent has kids, and they're all living together as a blended family. So my mom was divorced, and then my husband's mom and dad were not. They were your typical, like Brady Bunch. No, they weren't Brady Bunch because Brady Bunch was blended. But mom and dad were together. They raised their kids. Mom stayed home until the kids grew up, and then she went back to college, became a psychologist. So Justin, when I met my husband, had a concept in his mind of how the home should be. And I had a concept in my mind of how the home should be. And we had to work through that because there were times where not that we had to change that, but there were parts of him that hasn't changed, but I've just learned to work with because I love him so much. And there are things about me, but because have been ingrained because of how I was brought up, that aren't going to change. We just learn to deal with because we love each other, right? But
Mhm.
I do think that there are parts of people that it's very, very, very difficult to change that because that's how the home was.
Mm.
Just abuse. If you grow up being abused, that's normal to you. So chances are you're going to abuse because that was how it was in the home. That's what was normal there. And if it was normal there, that's normal for me. And it's, yes, it can be changed, but you would have to go through intense, therapy. You'd have to recognize that it wasn't normal, etc. But yeah, that home piece is very integral to a person.
Home. Oh, it makes me wonder because sometimes you'll hear that certain parts of society or mindsets can only change when the old generation dies out. And there's been that part of me that's like, no, what if you can influence them or change their mind? And my mom's she's often been the one telling me like, hey, trying to influence and change what someone thinks or believes is a very tricky business. If they're not ready or open to change, the odds that you're going to be able to, it's very small. And
but then you also must ask yourself, why is it so important for me for that person to change?
Yeah. Yeah.
Why are you wanting that person to change so much?
Maybe that's the fascist within me. I have the answer.
Right. Yeah. You love me before you love anything else. But, no.
But
I mean, you have to understand the relationship too. You have to look at is it a relationship where you're possibly marry this person? Is it something that if whatever it is that you want to be changed, is it something that, is it cultural, right? That's why a lot of religions, you tend to marry within your own religion because of the cultural differences. And it's not so much at surface, but when you start getting in the depths of the relationship and child raising, that's when these cultural differences might start to clash. You know what I mean?
Yeah, very seriously.
Before you have kids, if you just have a dog, it might be okay. But then, once you get into the depths of relationships.
Do you think that's an effective way to prepare for a kid? Have a dog? As I've heard people say that, and I've heard that.
Well, sometimes that's not, feasible. I think live together first.
Yes, yeah, that's.
Yeah, if you can get a pet.
Mm-hmm. Practicing cooperation, compromise,
That's
things
right,
along those
yes.
lines. Yes.
Responsibility.
Oh my God, yeah. You have to feed it every day.
Thought you were gonna watch him. Thought you were gonna let him out. There's this big pile of crap on the floor. Communication.
Oh my God, yeah.
Communication is vital.
That strikes me. I keep hearing we're talking about extremes earlier. I've heard a lot about political divide getting more extreme in today's day, especially in America. Communication. Have you noticed personally that the modern times are more politically tense than throughout the rest of your life? Have you noticed that actually changing the way people live and act? Like,
well. Okay, so to me there's a couple components to that. From as far as communication, the extreme, where does the extreme come from? Where does it stem from? It does extend from obviously the extreme political parties, but where else? Media. Media. That vehicle of communication, I think, has been most detrimental to our society. Because you can listen to a certain station and hear one perspective, and then you're going to get the other perspective on another station because of who owns the station. They want you to come from this angle, and then another station wants you. So it's what you're hearing via the media. That's dividing. That is dividing. But when you look at the surface of people, sometimes people interacting with people, I don't know that sometimes we're being kind and nice to each other because we don't want to show that there's a divide. Do you know what I mean?
Like a fake nice?
No, but hey, just because I'm a white middle-aged woman doesn't mean I can't open the door for a young black man. Like showing them that, hey, look, I'm not going to act like I'm afraid of you or you're going to steal my purse or something like that. You know what I mean? Respecting, to me, and my husband and I talk about this all the time, be kind to people. Be nice. Just be nice. I mean, sometimes it can get you in trouble, but treat people nicely.
Oh, there's so
No
much to
matter
that.
what they look like, no matter what they say, how they speak, or what they're dressed like, treat people with kindness. And don't let those extreme media, that divisive media. I mean, honestly, put on Channel 6, Channel 3, and you can hear the divisiveness in the news and what they want you to think and believe. Because, and you know, that's all that some people do see, right? But you have to talk to people.
Whoa.
Seriously.
Yeah,
not every person who has that is that way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You know,
My
so-
God, yeah. That's been I don't know how
So
much I
it's-
can trust this explanation that pops into my
well,
head
think
when
about
I
it.
ask
Think about
myself.
it. Let's take Trump, right?
Mhm.
Trump is very divisive, right? And there's
Yes.
haters, right? What stations, media stations, still are putting Trump down? And then there's other stations that don't even talk about Trump at all.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they want to continue to, because of some reason, use him as a device to divide.
I heard it might have been MSNBC CEO when Trump was in office. He said something along the lines of him being great for ratings. Like, we haven't made this much. People were making record profits, which is very
Yeah.
interesting to pair with the fact that
Yeah,
your CNN,
well.
your Fox News, your MSNBC, their profit margin had been going down for several years prior to that. And when Trump came in, not only did it start to go back up to like normal levels, no, it broke records. How much money both Fox and CNN started to make. And so it's strange and a bit concerning and just confusing when I'll watch my dad, because left-leaning family, so he'll be watching like a CNN at nighttime, and they're still talking about Trump.
And the 6th, January 6th.
Yeah,
And you're like, haven't we moved past that?
that's such a strange one.
Why are they still bringing that up? Are they afraid? Are they afraid that there might be some Trump resurgence? Like, what is it that? I mean, yeah, you the whole idea of the possibility of, you know, he's trying to take away our democracy. You know, you have to really look at that. And I think we've thrown the word democracy around a lot, and I think that some people have tried to change or manipulate the meaning of what they think democracy is. Those people had the right to protest, as far as I'm concerned, but they did not have the right to break in.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, that's when things start to get weird.
Nobody should have, you know, that's not okay. So, yeah.
I was talking to my uncle. I had him on the podcast as well, and it's interesting because he's more right-leaning as opposed to my parents left-leaning. So it's nice. I like to get out of the bubble from time to time and see what the other side has to say. And he was bringing up like, hey, well, I don't know if you know this, but there were, after Trump got elected, riots as well, where people were protesting like, he's not our president, but you don't really hear that covered by the left-leaning media.
Or you want to prosecute these people that busted in the Capitol. Well, what about the rioters that are looting businesses in downtown Los Angeles?
That's so.
You know what I mean? So is it because of what they want you to think? Well, you're going to look back at that media bias, right? And that media, like, why are they not bringing that up? Why are they not talking about the other side or what happened prior to that incident? Right? Because they want you to see something the way they want you to see it. You know?
That's
unfortunate for the media to be that way.
I was hearing that the Walter Cronkite-esque
Wow.
hosts of news used to be in the more unbiased phase, where there were very few, maybe there was only one, I forget the specifics, but there were fewer media channels back in the day, and so that their business model, this is what the explanation I heard, take that for what it's worth, their business model wanted to reach as many people as possible, since they were essentially the only ones. So like, let's just try and be a more unbiased, not super upsetting anybody platform. But now, as especially the internet starting to pick up, there are more TV channels, more media channels.
Well, then it becomes a little bit more competitive.
Yes, and like, I want to grab this group of people and create this niche for them to listen into, where there's a strange sort of echo chamber that can become created. I wonder if people have a bias where they want to hear what they agree with.
Of course. Yeah, who wants confrontation?